It was supposed to be a normal Sunday dinner. You know, the kinda crowded table in a quiet suburban house, forced smiles, and conversation that never went deeper than work or the weather. But that night, everything cracked open, and it all started with a laugh that cost way too much. I was sitting next to my husband, Daniel. My hands were folded in my lap, and I was already feeling that awareness of how my brown skin stood out against the pale walls, the pale faces, and the pale expectations of his family. It was a weight I'd learned to carry silently since we got married. The joke came from Daniel's uncle, so casually, while he was passing the salad bowl. "Good thing the lights are bright in here," he said, "or Maya would disappear into the dark." Then came the chuckles. They were quick, rehearsed, comfortable, the kind of laughter that doesn't bother to check who it's hurting. For a split second, I smiled out of habit. It was a trained response, something you learn when you realize that survival sometimes means swallowing your pain before it even reaches your tongue. But that night, something inside me finally refused. The room suddenly felt smaller, tighter, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if I would stay quiet again. And then I heard it. Daniel laughed too. It wasn't loud, it wasn't proud, but it was enough. Enough for me to notice. Enough for my chest to ache with a pain that had nothing to do with the joke and everything to do with betrayal. I thought of all the other moments I had ignored. The way his mother introduced me as exotic. The way family photos always placed me slightly in the back. The way compliments about my beauty were framed as surprises, as if it were an exception, not a fact. Suddenly, the weight of all those years pressed down on my throat. "Why is that funny?" I asked. My voice was calm, but it was shaking. The table went silent, and that silence felt louder than the laughter that came before it. The uncle just shrugged, confused, defensive. "It's just a joke," he said. "Don't be so sensitive." That sentence, that one landed harder than the joke itself. It carried generations of dismissal in its simplicity. So I stood up, my chair scraped against the floor, my hands were no longer steady. And for the first time, I spoke not just for myself, but for every single moment I had been reduced to a shade instead of a person. I told them about growing up in America and being told I was pretty for a dark girl. I talked about teachers who assumed I needed extra help, about strangers touching my hair without asking, about learning to love myself in a country that constantly suggested I was something to be tolerated, not celebrated. I asked them why my skin was always the punchline, why their humor always seemed to lean on someone else's humiliation, and why silence was always expected from the person being hurt, but never from the person causing it. Daniel tried to interrupt, to soften it, to tell me I was taking it too far. And that was the moment something inside me broke completely. I turned to him, tears finally falling, and asked him quietly if this was about me being poor or disabled or gay. "Would you still laugh?" No one answered. His mother looked down at her plate. His father cleared his throat. His uncle suddenly found the wall very interesting. The fight didn't need to be loud after that. It lived in the stillness, in the realization that this wasn't about one joke. It was about a system of comfort built on someone else's pain. I picked up my coat and walked out. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't apologize for a discomfort that I didn't create. Later that night, sitting alone in my car, I cried. Not because I felt weak, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt completely honest. Back at the house, Daniel sat on the couch, replaying the moment he laughed. He was realizing, far too late, that neutrality never protects anyone. His silence had chosen a side, and he was learning that love without defense is just convenience, wearing a softer name. The next morning, the messages started coming in. Some were apologetic, some were defensive, and some blamed me for ruining dinner. And that's when I understood, the truth always disrupts, especially in rooms that are built on denial. That dinner didn't just end a meal. It exposed a fault line that had always been there, reminding everyone that racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it jokes, sometimes it smiles, passes the salad, and waits for you to accept it quietly. And when someone finally refuses, the real fight begins. It's not a fight over words, but over whether your dignity is negotiable at the very table you've been invited to sit at. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Let's keep this conversation going.